Forward, seeker. When petals fall like ashes, do not despair. Hip hop is here for you, ready with the truth to you. When you feel sad and blue, stay strong, don't hide it, boo. Use its lyricism, not pills and potions. Make a conscious decision to calm iller minds' commotion. In this guide you will find wisdom and knowledge foraged from MC masters past, the everlasting healers, fallen heroes and dreamers, hip-hop speakers of truth. Use it with the youth, that they may blossom and shine with divine light, despite lifelong plights, through darkness and night, to live life fully in joy's delight. Blessings and light from your guide, the Kizza.
Hello there, this is Glow with the Flow podcast, and today we've got a spoken word artist and drummer with us called
Joe Cook.
Joe Cook is a don, so can't wait to hear what you've got to say today about therapeutic applications of hip hop and mental health and all that jazz. And then, sounds what?
Very complicated.
Complicated. We do this stuff all the time, every day, innit? So I think the complexities for other people to maybe get their heads around what on earth it is. So I want to spread it in the UK, and that's why you're here.
Cool.
To talk about what you do in real life, so that you know we can get some spreading and ideas changing about how to work with people.
Yeah, of course.
So Ben's been working with us.
Hi, Ben from Let's Feed Brum. Welcome back, everyone.
Ben's been working with us for a long time at Hip Hop Heals, because our sister company, project Dubgasm, donated food and money from one of our events over to his charity. And then over the last few years, we've been just connecting, and, Ben's my mentor now, and we look at social issues from the perspective of like a person-centered approach, which basically means we do what people need when they need it for them, rather than what we think people should be doing or having, or caring for them in the ways that we are trained or know. Because there's a lot of basically bullshit around interventions, and I'm sick of doing what people want me to do for the funders or commissioners and not actually helping people how they want to be helped. And being the victim of this, I've actually had a PTSD diagnosis last week, and nobody told me. So for 5 months I'd seen a psychiatrist. She diagnosed me at the time verbally on the phone, but as you know, with PTSD your memory goes all over the place, so I don't remember her saying that. I asked her, what are you diagnosing me with? And she's like, oh, we'll send you a letter out. She didn't send me the letter. So I've been floating around in a recovery process that's been going on since May 2020. And it's now October 2021. And I've been asking since May 2020, which is like 17 months ago, what's wrong with me? Why hasn't this been looked at for 20 years? Can you just diagnose it so I can get the right help? And people have just gone, oh, well, go here for a diagnosis. We can't diagnose you. But you're a doctor. Okay, I can diagnose you, but the processes that you have to go through, or that you go to the community mental health team and this, that, and the other, and went to them. They said, oh, we can give you the trauma training, trauma therapy, but we can't diagnose you. I'm like, you can give me an intervention, but you can't tell me if it's the right one, because you're not allowed to diagnose me. All right, so who can diagnose me? All right, well, you need to go to a psychiatrist. Okay, psychiatrist was patronizing, just wanted to give me tablets, and then ended up going to another team. So the fourth intervention, long story short, I accidentally found out that a diagnosis had been put on the system, and the hip pain that I've been experiencing for 5 years, which has no physical cause, that also has a name now, which I can't remember because it sounds like a random term. But yeah, somebody I'd spoken to on the phone 3 times has diagnosed me with a 20-year-long condition that nobody else has, despite multiple counsellors and interventions and so on and so forth, visits to the doctors. And after 3 phone calls, she's also put a label on this 5-year-old hip pain without never meeting me. And for a throw in as well, she just chucked in the generalized anxiety disorder label to cover everything just in case. So to be honest, I'm a bit pissed off, and I'm sick of doing projects where people just want to get the money from a funder and go and do whatever it is they've been trained to. Like artists or project managers, you just look at the world from the perspective of, right, how am I going to earn and what do I need to do to get the money? Not really people, you know, who need some kind of support, or not looking at how they need that support or why they need that support and then working backwards from them. So Hip Hop Heals as a non-profit social enterprise is a direct response to these kinds of experiences that I've had as an individual. And also being part of a community where not everybody likes to do work using words or dance or music that comes from traditional, very visible Western traditions. So we're shifting the conversation to look at underground alternative art forms. And we just happen to like hip hop where we're at, don't we? So, you know, it's a universal art form that lots of people can engage with. And it's all about life story and identity. What have I experienced and how am I going to express it? So that's a bit of framing. That's the framing for today, guys.
I don't think I need to say anything.
Kids is pissed off. Let's be creative.
Yeah, it's going to be good. Yeah.
People will probably be listening now thinking, well, how do we shift out of that world we're in, where people come up with a theory of change? They go through processes around their company and their business and their marketing, their social media, and they look at how they're going to get people into a workshop, and they're going to get money to deliver the workshop, how they're going to evaluate the workshop, and all these types of things, where me and Joe have been working so long in the community that we've met millions of people, haven't we? You just write all those bids and then we have to deliver them, but we don't see them as being fit for purpose because the person who's writing the bid doesn't necessarily know what is needed on the ground. And the organisations that we partner with might not know what's possible. So as artists, we come in, open a walnut, crack it open, take the fruit out, the nuts out, we look at what's in there, what needs to be rejigged, and how we can sort of create a bit of magic. And that doesn't come from writing paragraphs, punching numbers, and sitting in a computer office with a desk, does it? You have to see things go wrong and see people explode. You have to see somebody throwing up, a fight kick off. You have to be there holding somebody back while the chair's in the air and something's about to go off. Yeah.
Well.
Yeah.
You have to just come back.
And,
try again.
and we're talking about trauma here.
Yeah.
So I know from personal experience, and you know from personal experience, that things are not linear and you can't control what's going to necessarily come out the other end. So there needs to be enough space in our projects where people can just be human, and we're not looking at, oh, well, that's not going to fit into the funder's priorities of so and so and so and so, because all of our priorities should be the person that we're serving, shouldn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I've got to say that, you know, when I first met you kids, where we started off from what we were doing, we were working with people on the street directly. So we were never a funded charity to go do the work. We started off just as volunteers, engaging with people already in that condition. And people on the street, every single one of them have experienced very difficult times. I would go as far as saying many of them have experienced trauma. A lot of people that are in that situation have arrived there, not of their own choosing. They haven't ended up in that situation because that was their dream. They've ended up in that situation because they have been let down, sometimes poor decisions along the way, but they're experiencing being in that environment all the time. So when you start to work with people where they're at, the people in those situations shape their own solutions. And if you give them enough time in listening, then you don't have to come to the table with all the answers. You just have to come receptive. And from that, that's really the perspective that has shaped where we are going now. It's getting to understand what is needed. And you can only really pick it up from the people who are experiencing that situation. So what I was also going to say on top of what you said at the beginning there was that we've had many conversations with individuals, MCs and artists, and I found it really fascinating that I think many of those individuals did experience trauma in their lives, and even though they might not have been diagnosed or helped in the conventional system, they found a route for themselves, and particularly through hip hop, because that's what this series of podcasts is about. And obviously, you know, the history of it, how it first appeared, the social situation in which generated that response, which is now copied all over the world, isn't it? That people write lyrics, people make beats, they put that together, and it's a form of expression, but it's also has therapeutic value. So in all those conversations with people, we've got Joe here with us now, it's like, you know, one of the questions we ask is, how did your own journey start? How did you kind of, you know,
That's me then.
yeah, I guess so, because there's who else is in the room?
Yeah. All right. I mean, the only thing I was going to say about all that is, I think as well, like, it sounds really negative, but art and music and lyrics, it's just a catalyst as well. Like, that alone won't change the world or someone, but it's a good catalyst. And I think I think sometimes people get hung up on, they're like, oh, I did a poetry workshop with a group of young people and I've changed their lives. And so you probably haven't. You've probably given them like a really great hour of whatever, but there's so many other variables that come in where that catalyst is a part of it. So sometimes my problem in the sector is people go in, go out kind of thing, or don't join the dots a bit more, if that makes sense. And so you getting them to write couplets is brilliant, but it's not, to be honest, it's not really helping their situation at home. You're giving them a safe space, and so how do you build that in? Is it that, you know, through that you can have conversations about what's going on, that you can pass on to safeguarding leads, that you can speak to their key workers about and stuff. It's like using it as a catalyst to benefit people. But I think we can't be that arrogant to think that like that alone changes everything, because otherwise, you know, there would be no homeless. If everyone could like paint a canvas and problems disappear, like, then it would, you know, like that's just the only thing I want to say. I'm not trying to be devil's advocate. I just think that's my problem with the more I've been involved. With some people have this real level of ego where they think, yeah, I did a workshop with the homeless and I brought all this value, and like, yeah, you did, but then when that workshop finished, those people still had to, you know, they were still sleeping rough or whatever. So how do you use the art in a more than just within that moment? That was the only thing I wanted to say. I don't sound like I'm just sucker punching anything that's just been said. I hope that makes sense.
No, I'll just quickly respond to that.
Go for it.
Well, I spilled tea down my trousers. Oh, mate. I had a journey through my training in therapeutic writing where I decided, for the reasons that you just said, I was going to make sure that every session showed somebody a technique they could use to let off steam when they're on their own. So in my personal experience, having to go through stuff and not feeling like I had a connection or a support system or some kind of nurturing relationship that I could use to kind of release how I was feeling or create understanding, I had to work out ways to create it for myself. And death can be so isolating, trauma can be harrowing. So you don't kind of want to reveal that you're struggling, because other people will listen to that and sometimes either push you on, or they might push you back and say, "Oh, you're still not over that," or "Why are you still bringing that up?" Or
it could sometimes be a competition.
I've just had this.
Like, you know, like, and people trying to out.
And there's certain techniques with writing that help you to process and put down and negate some of the more harmful things that might be on your radar coming to you if you don't let some steam off. So
no, I think my point is more about the artists themselves, just like you're not Che Guevara
Yeah.
because you've done like a workshop. That's kind of the point I was getting at. But anyway, sorry. Ben's question, me.
Who are you and where do you come from?
Yes, my name is Joe Cook from Birmingham. My journey probably started with playing drums. So I started by playing drums when I was about 11 or 12. I was in year 6. I remember I was in year 6. So a long time. I'm nowhere near as good as I should be for how long I've been playing. But yeah, so always just loved music and creativity and art, which I was thinking about this on the way here. I was trying to think of some really profound things to say. And like growing up for me, it was all just imagination. It wasn't creativity that we now call creativity. Like for me, it was just all imagination. I always knew I had a good imagination. Like I'd write short stories, I'd draw pictures. And I think being an only child as well, you just play on your own. So you just kind of invent your own worlds and games. And I was obsessed with like Pokemon. I designed my own like Pokemon series, like just all that kind of, it was called Power Pets. I remember really clearly, So always like naturally into creativity and had a mad imagination. And then just with playing drums, started a band. So when we started a band, Lobster, which is still in now, been together about 12 years. Started writing lyrics and just really enjoyed writing lyrics. And it got to a point where I wasn't just writing lyrics for songs, I was just writing all the time, and I ended up just having like a load of notebooks full of stuff. And then I can't remember exactly what happened, but there was some point when I was about in my early 20s where I know what it was actually. I went through a bit of a rough time, and looking back, it really wasn't that rough at the time. I went through a breakup, and me and my mates got jumped, and it just like that was on the same day. So I got dumped in the morning. Jumped in the evening, not by the same person.
There's a song there somewhere.
Yeah, literally. So my confidence just really scrambled, and so I just thought like, I want to do something for me. And a pal of mine who I knew at uni, he lived in Camden, and he was really connected with like hip hop and grime and stuff in the UK. He was really on it, and he would always send me stuff to listen to. And he sent me George the Poet. So like the first time I'd ever really heard spoken word before, and it sounds really arrogant, but I was like, mate, I've got books of rhymes here.
Sound better than that.
I was like, I could do that. And initially when I first started doing it, I was rapping, but I wasn't really rapping to beats. I was like, a guy I lived with, he played acoustic guitar. And I know that sounds really cringy. It wasn't one of them like, here's my acoustic cover of like the Fugees, like there's always like it wasn't like that. So we'd come up with like kind of rhythmic parts, and I'd sit and write, or I'd go through my books and be like, we can use this. And then just for whatever reason, I just kind of crash landed in the spoken word scene because everyone I knew was a rapper. And I thought, you know what, for me, spoken word is like, it's seeing if your lyrics hold up, because some of my favorite MCs, I love these tracks and I'll read the lyric sheets and I'm actually like, that's actually not that interesting. It's the flow and the production and the tone behind it, which is all important. And people disagree. I had this conversation with a guy called Andy Wickett, who was the original member of Duran Duran, and he wrote their big hits, but he left I don't know the whole story, but he basically left the band before they became the huge. So he wrote like Girls on Film and all that, like whatever it is. And but he was saying for him, it's about the melody. That it's like the melody is the most important. Where for me, it's the lyrics. I think your lyrics should be able to read and hold up on their own.
Can I just?
Yeah, go for it.
It's probably a dumb question, but what is the difference between spoken word and rapping?
That's interesting. So, do you know? So, rap, the word RAP. Do you know what that stands for? As an acronym,
No.
Riverman Poetry. So that's what rap stands for. So there's very.
I thought he said Riverman Poetry, as in River Man.
I know.
But you said Riverman Poetry. I was like,
sorry,
it doesn't mean
Riverman. And I
Riverman.
got a strong bump for me. Accent, so like, yeah.
Riverman Poetry.
Riverman Poetry. RAP.
I prefer the Riverman.
Riverman.
Anyway,
Yeah. Riverman. Yeah. Riverman.
I'm the
that's the song.
Riverman.
So it's an acronym.
Yeah, so it's an acronym. It used to be Rhythm American Poetry because obviously it was born out of South Bronx and stuff.
Yeah.
But obviously it's recognized on a more global scale. So when people ask me that, I find it really hard to answer. I think spoken word for me is poetry which is made to be performed. not necessarily for the page. So it doesn't have to rhyme, but I think it's supposed to be an oral thing that people are supposed to sit and listen to it.
Okay.
Whereas obviously poetry, I'm not going to pretend I know a lot about poetry because I don't. Like when you got people like, obviously I can't even think of any names, who like the big shots in like the poetry or T.S. Eliot and all that. Like, like, you know, yeah, like, you know, but then you can look back through history and you can see like different cultures, like Viking stuff, it was all about saying it out loud and stuff. Even like the African griot, it was about saying it out loud. So poetry's been spoken more than it has been written down. So yeah, for me, it's just literally that the music disappears.
Right.
And I guess when there is music, that it's not how we rap. You're locking into the 2s and the 4s. You're locking into the beat. You don't have to be as on beat, but there's still a flow to it. Where rap, it's about being in time with the music.
I remember, like, obviously, you know, at school, and we did Shakespeare at school. So sometimes when it's those passages and they're spoken out, there's a kind of, they don't necessarily have a rhythm, but the actual words that are used and the ideas that are brought, it has an impact, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It has, like, reading something is kind of different. I mean, I'm just thinking about like the stirring speech like Henry VIII when he was calling his troops together.
Right.
And these like impassioned
Yeah.
words,
Really?
and that it does touch us, doesn't it?
Yeah,
Like emotionally and
completely.
mentally. You know?
Whether that's Shakespeare, whether that's
Yeah.
you know, can't think of any of them. I'm just thinking of like really old white men. I'm trying to think of
William Wordsworth.
Yeah, like, you know, so even down to like Plato and
Yeah.
like Greek philosophy, there's a lot of like poetic device. But sorry, to answer your question, I think it's where the words become the real core of it rather than the timing and the beat and stuff like that. That was how I would answer it. Yeah, but then I can think of rappers that are a bit offbeat. Mike Skinner, RZA from Wu-Tang Clan. He's kind of, they have like very lazy flows where they're just on point. like, but yeah, that's how I would answer it. It's just where the words become the meter rather than the beat and stuff. Like, yeah,
That's a good way of describing it.
yeah.
Thanks.
I've got to know
You
about their
educated
age.
me now.
Even though Riverman poetry would be way more profound. So yeah, that's me, I think. I didn't even talk about my work though, did I? So I should probably talk about that. Because I don't,
Yeah, well, just thinking that some people might be listening to this podcast thinking that we don't know what therapeutic hip hop is or why it could be therapeutic or how to work with people that could benefit from it.
Yeah.
So narrowing it down,
Yeah.
can you talk to us about a time that you work with people through hip hop?
Yeah. So majority of my work is in educational youth engagement. So I work in pupil referral unit, which in Coventry they call it ELC, Extended Learning Centre, which is where kids have been removed from mainstream education, and it's more than often behaviour issues. And I don't mean to sound like it's a stereotype, it is. There are centres where it's more mental health, like they struggle being in those environments, but the kids I work with, it's behaviour issues. Could it ELC because it's supposed to be temporary? They're not supposed to be there forever. They get in a bit of trouble at school, they get kicked out, they come to the ELC, they're maybe there for a couple of months, and then they get put back into mainstream education. That's the point of it. Doesn't always work that way. I've worked with kids that have been there 5 years and stuff like that. So, you know, some people get lost in it. Some people, it suits them better than the mainstream. So when I do that, I work in a primary and junior school as well, doing creative writing workshops. And I'm involved with some music making after school projects in Birmingham. So yeah, music, and my background being drums, music production, and lyric writing. So kind of rhythm and words is what I deal with. So I think the kids wouldn't call it hip hop, but I use hip hop on a daily, especially in the pupil referral units. A lot of the kids I work with are into drill music. So for anyone, I'm sure people will know, but to be saying drill originated in Chicago, South Side, kind of a branch off of trap music. Stereotypically very very I don't want to say urban, but very like gang orientated, very crime orientated, very criminality orientated, very talking about money and drugs and how they're getting the money, and very calling out other oppositions and people literally boasting about crimes that they've committed or haven't committed. Then that made its way over to the UK, really took off in areas of London like Peckham and Brixton and stuff like that. And then now it's like a few, you know, there's been a number one, I forgot the name of the bloody tune now, the Body remix in the UK, which is completely, at its core is like a drill beat and stuff like that. So it's popular culture now. It's like, you know, I heard it on an advert like the other day, and I could hear a drill beat, and it was also really irrelevant advert. I can't think, like an insurance company or something like that. Like,
Yeah.
and you've had people like, again, my mind's going blank for names, but people like Hugo, I think it might be Hugo Boss. I've done like things where they've had like trap phones and like you know, it's like people are really jumping on the culture basically. So yeah, so a lot of the kids are into drill, and a lot of them write lyrics. So a lot of my work, I try and be as youth-led as possible, but a lot of my work, the kids more than often have a load of lyrics in their phone, and I'll listen to them, and we'll make beats, and then we'll write stuff. And so those aspects of hip-hop, of like beat making and the MCing, not so much the graffiti and the breakdancing side of it, but those two elements are the elements I really draw upon. So yeah, I guess that's how I use it on a daily. Even same in the primary schools, man, because like I teach whole class, but I'm not an English teacher. I use like what I know as lyric writing techniques, which for me comes from my love of hip hop. So yeah.
So I've got a question
Mhm.
because I was really intrigued by your comment after the introduction when you were talking about this kind of ego thing that
Yeah.
a practitioner brings into that kind of
Yeah.
scenario. So being aware of that, is there something that you do with yourself when you're in that situation to try and remove that? Because I guess that part of working, you know, and you know, even myself when I'm kind of with people and working with people, I'm conscious that, you know, you said something really interesting. You're not going to change the world, but the truth is you do want to have an impact.
Yeah.
And so what do you do? Is there something
Yeah.
that you know, how do you approach that?
It's just gotta be youth led. I'm talking about what I do with young people. It has to be youth led.
In yourself is what I'm saying.
Yeah. So what I
Yeah.
mean with that is,
Mm.
I'm just a blank canvas. I'll go in. I've got my laptop, my drum machine, a drum kit, an amp,
Mhm.
and I've got my brain to do lyric, and that's all I can offer as a practitioner. Like I can't play guitar, so I'm like, these are what I can bring to the table. What do you want to do? And if they're like, I want to, so I've got a lad at the moment who wants to make horror soundscapes for like
Okay.
video games. I don't really play video games. I'm not really into horror.
Yeah.
It's okay, if that's what you want to do. Let's do that. So I think for me, it's not like, no, you need to be making boom bap because that's the best genre in the world. So for me, that's how I diminish my ego, that it's not about what I think's good.
Yeah.
I'm not like a tastemaker or a gatekeeper. Like, you know, obviously I'll guide them.
Hang on, you're not a tastemaker or a gatekeeper. Have you seen all the people following you around on the streets like a Pied Piper? Joe? Don't say yourself short for the podcast. Tell it like it is.
So like, yeah, I know what you mean. I'm really grateful for what I do as well. I always like, so I don't go in there being like, and me and my friend were having this conversation the other day, and we were like, boy, like Birmingham rappers, man, some of them just, they come in, they work when I want to work, they do what they like. I'm so grateful for the opportunities I've got. So it's like, I want to do a good job, if you know what I mean. It's not like me coming in like, yeah, I might do this, I might do that. So
Work with me, darling.
that kind of,
in a way, I guess what you're saying, I mean, if I'm interpreting
no,
correctly,
hopefully.
is that you're saying like, these are the things that I can bring, you press my buttons.
Yeah. Well, it's just like, this
You
is
know,
what we can do.
Beep, beep, beep.
This is what we can do. Does any of that sound good to you? Like, yeah, then they go beep, beep, yeah. And I've had it. So I've got a lad who's been in the crew since year 7. He'll never go back to mainstream. He doesn't want to go back to mainstream. But he would get sent to my class and he'd say to me like, I'm being honest, mate, I have no interest in like any of this. And I was like, okay, that's cool, but I've still got you for like 45 minutes. So what can we do? So once we watched a documentary about a drill artist he likes, like, and I just sat there and asked him questions like, what do you think about that? What do you think he is in prison? And we just had a conversation. And I've recently found out he's into boxing. So now we just, because I box, we just talk about boxing and watch boxing videos and stuff. And it's just like that thing of like, I'm going to be guided by you as much as I can.
Yeah.
And even if it gets to the point when like,
So you box, do you?
yeah, it's a big part of my life.
So how come you kept your nose so straight then?
I haven't. Like, all the cartilage is gone in it. Like, so yeah, man, blocking too many punches in my face. But yeah, that note, Anyway, that's a whole other podcast. But sorry, my mind's just gone out. I'm thinking about when I got my nose broken now. But so just that really of like, and I know my work might be sitting in like, we don't pay you to sit there and watch boxing. Like, but it's just about engaging young people however you can. I always say to people when people ask me for advice, like, don't try and be down with the kids because you're just gonna look like a mug. So like it's important to try and keep your finger on the pulse. Like I've got into not got into, but I know a lot of drill artists now because they play me their stuff and whatever, and I understand the lingo. But it's just like having those conversations, just being like, oh, I know nothing about drill, mate. What's your favorite drill tune? Rather than, oh yeah, drill, 140 BPM. I know about that. It's just about like, it's not about you as a facilitator. It's just not about you. When if it is about you, then I don't know, go do a TED talk or something like do something like that really puts you in the limelight.
Go and sit in a communal workspace and talk about. Oh, sorry. I'm gonna
but don't get me wrong, like there's people that like their opinions deserve to be heard. Like if you did a TED talk, like I would watch it. Like, but yeah, I hope that answers your question. I'm naturally quite unconfident as a person as well. So I always feel like I'm like, I think that went well. I'm always like that after a session. Like I always want it to be as good as it can be.
I think I like it when what you're saying. I like what you said, like being a blank canvas, because I think that actually, I mean, if I relate it to like circumstances I find myself in with people, it's a little bit like they're individuals who feel as if they don't have a voice or anything to say. They're pushed aside. I mean, you know, the street thing is like, I'm invisible, no one notices me. I guess, you know, if someone's been excluded, like that behavior, it's not, they're excluded because no one has taken the time to understand why that behavior is there, and they just want the behavior out of the way. So it's not, they're still ignored, aren't they? You know, so I think that individual kind of needs to like walk into a space where they feel like they can do what they want, talk, speak their voice. And whether that's a lyric, pick up a beat, watch a boxing video, whatever it is. And I think that a blank canvas is a nice way of putting it. It's like, you know, your turn to speak now. Yeah, no, completely. And like, I've been fortunate enough, sometimes I've been in positions where I had a girl I was working with who did a bit of drumming, and she wasn't really into that much anymore. So then she was always listening to music, and she was always listening to really kind of poppy, broken heart ballad kind of things. And I was like, oh, is this kind of what you're into? And she was like, yeah. And I was like, why don't we write like a song like this, like a kind of heartbreak? And she wrote these brilliant lines, but I'm a lyrical guy. I'm not a melody man. I can't sing. So it was just like, we had this tune and I was just like, but I don't know, like she doesn't want to rap it, so I can't teach her that. Like, how am I going to do it? I'm in a fortunate position where I had some budget to get a facilitator in. And that's what I mean about the ego as well. That, like, it's about like, if I can't do what is going to really work for you, I can at least try and get someone in that can put that in place. And I've got my friend in Nicole Justice, who works in Prues in Brum, and she's an amazing rapper and vocalist. And she came in and did like a vocal workshop, and we got the melody down. And it's just that thing of like, well, I can't sing, so you're not going to write a song. Like, it's like, no, like it's, and I think I understand that not everyone has that privilege where I had a budget to be able to pay for that. But I think that's what I mean about making it as youth-centered as physical possible, as or learn, whether you want to call it learner-led, or I don't know what the correct term is for the people who work on the street, like participants or whatever, just making it centered on them. Person-centered, probably the word that you use. But sometimes, I mean, and this is just really an open question, because sometimes we encounter people who've never had the opportunity to voice their thoughts and feelings, and you know when you encounter them that they live in a completely different world. It's the same world, but they have their own way of doing things, and actually trying to connect with those individuals. You come across them, and we have conversations around that when we go out on the street with certain individuals. It's like we've seen them for like months and some even years, but they don't engage with anyone.
Yeah.
And they're in their own world now, almost permanently. And the question is, how can you make that? Because we come from a much more structured world.
Mm-hmm.
You know, everything is structured in the society we live in. There are some people who wander through our society who are completely disconnected from it. And I guess quite a number of them might be in mental asylums as well. And I keep thinking,
We're here now.
speak for yourself. I keep thinking that we're missing out on something. There is something there, some knowledge, understanding, perception, intuition we need to hear.
Yeah, I don't have the answer. I know, I fully agree with you. I'm just like, in what I do, it is just sometimes like some of the kids I work with, particularly in the Pews, have really mad lives at home. Some of them are in the care system and some. So sometimes that like 40 odd minutes they get with me might be the only time that week, because there's a lot of hostility between them and the teachers. And I get that, because when I was at school, it was like, the teacher's your enemy, the teacher's like, which it shouldn't be, but like I was one of those hothead kids that felt like that. Like, what do you mean I can't have this badge on my blazer? Like, I'm being oppressed or whatever. Like, and so sometimes like I might be the only person that asks them like how their week's been, because they're not getting that at home and stuff like that. Like, and like, you know, so there is that element as well that I think we take for granted, like how normal our lives can be. And some people are just, home is chaos, like, you know. And if you're like, I'm dealing with a lad at the moment whose father committed suicide in July, and he's like 15, and it's just, I can't even, like, you know, God bless both my parents are still alive. If I lost my dad now as a 29-year-old man, I'd still probably lose my head. And if I lost my dad to suicide as a 15-year-old kid, because I was a bit mad when I was younger, like it's like that. I don't get how they, like, I don't get how he's just carrying on, you know what I mean? And it's that thing of like, we don't talk about it in the class. He's not wanting to write about it, and I think that's a good thing. So we're focusing on like a real bravado, braggadocious like track. But it's like, if that what you want to do for 40 minutes, mate, who am I to say no? We're gonna actually, and thinking back to kids' thing with the therapeutic thing of like, it's kids that's completely turned me on to this idea of therapeutic hip hop and stuff. There's can be like really bad trying to get people to talk about these really deep, dark, like if you were like,
might not be the right time and space for that.
And just also like, some people don't want to be seen. So I can imagine if you're working with homeless, it's like, write me a poem about being homeless. Like that can have a really positive thing. Like people are like, I want to express my thing, but I want some people are like, well, it's not all I am, like, you know what I mean? Like, it's
difficult to do that in a formalized situation. It's kind of something that kind of has to evolve, I guess.
No, completely. That's what I find with the drill thing. That, and again, kids has made a really good point. Like, so much of drill is about violence and drugs and whatever, that it almost becomes part of the music, that for it to be drill, you have to talk like that. And there is a word for it. It's like a psychological word. It starts with an S, which is basically how, like, if I said to you, picture a bathroom, you'd think of a bath, a sink, maybe some curtains, maybe, and like that our brain creates these, like, I think they call them prototypes of things, and we do that with music. That if we hear like country, if we say like country music, we think
going back to my old town and the girl I used to know.
Is it a suggestion?
I can't.
Like that.
I'm going to have to Google it. It's like something that's got an A in it. Shenanigans. So it's a weird word, but our brains do that, and our brains do that with music. That we paint these. Our brains always constantly trying to grab information. So drill, in my opinion, this is just my like theory, that when kids think drill, it's like, okay, being in a trap house, guns, violence, And it's that, and a lot of what I do is unpacking that and saying to the kids, like, we can make a drill beat, no problem, we can use that. But what have you thought about? Maybe we could talk about this. No, try it. You can use the same kind of flow and always speak like this. You can do exactly that if you want, but let's switch it up.
Can you do the rest of the podcast with that voice?
Just let's go with the flow. Just in the above. I can't think of any rhymes. I can't freestyle save my life, but but it's always that, and also that voice, like, you know, like all of a sudden, if I'm London town, I'm speaking really, and all this like kind of like down here. Yeah. But anyway, that one Mike wouldn't even pick that up. But the point being is like, and I've done that, and that for me, that's the best bloody feeling, because I've had it when I was working with Solihull youth offenders, and one of the lads was writing all this madness about, you know, I'm gonna stab you in the back of this, that. Like, I mean, physically, I'm going to stab you. And he was a really nice kid, and I said to him, why? And bit of context, his father had also passed away, and he said, oh, I've wrote something about my dad passing, but then he was writing all this like, I'm a gangster, blah, 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 blah. And I was like, mate, you talking about like your father dying, for me, has way more impact, is way more interesting. Like, why are you talking? And he goes, because it's easy. He's like, I can just say the maddest. I could say, you know, I'm going to come in your house with a chainsaw, and I'm going to like, and that's like, it doesn't have to be, it's easy to like, just make up rubbish, like what they call it in drill, waffle, like just make up. But it's difficult to dig deeper a bit and go inside yourself. And so I get it on a level. It's, and if all you're hearing is people talking about that, then you're just gonna, and you hear the same phrases over and over again about sitting in the bando, the booked up car, put on a bench, put in a spliff, which means that if someone is dead, they're smoking your ashes in a spliff. That's how like brutal it is. And put on a bench means when people die and they have the memory on the bench, like this bench is dedicated to, that's what these kids are talking about, but they're just regurgitating the phrases that they hear. And like kids I work with in the primary like drill. So sorry, I'm going off on it's not, you know, it's filtering down to like young people. But the point being is, sorry, that when you can take that drill formula and then apply it to more, I don't know whether you kind of call it consciousness or real, they're getting the same buzz, the same vibe. They're just lyrics are a bit more self-reflective, and then that's where all the therapeutic value. So a lot of what I do is taking a drill framework and then trying my best to just switch up the lyrical content a bit.
do you have moments like when the people you're working with like say things or express things and you're like, you're not sure how to handle it, or you're lost for words, and you're literally, in
terms of like a safeguard, you know, in terms of like a profound thing?
More of a kind of a profound.
I'm going to pretend we've never done this podcast before. So, like, one thing I spoke about there, but I'll repeat, is I had a young man I was working with. He wanted to make a drill track, and he lost his sister. His sister was hit by a car back in like 2016, and he was like, "I want to write about that," and I was a bit like, "Right, okay," like knowing that, you know, oh man, this could get messy, like, you know, I'm not, and I always say to kids, like, I ain't a therapist, man. I'm just a dude that writes rhymes and makes music. Like, I'm not in a position to say, like, how are we going to talk about it? So got to the day when we got to that section of the song, and I remember we were both sitting in silence with the loop on, the beat we made, and I was just like, okay, mate, so what we're going to do here? Like, and then he came up with one line. Oh God, what was it? In 2016, my life went to hell, running from feds, trying to put me in a cell. I can't describe the pain. When my mom said, you're not going to see your sister again. And then that was enough. So he came with that all by himself. And then what we did was we started using, I was like, use that in what if you're using a simile, mate, what could you say it's like? And he was like, hell. And I was like, that's a really interesting image. What could we say? And it was like, and he came up with like, took me to hell's gates. And it was just using like metaphor and simile to get there. And the thing that's more profound about him is, as we were finishing the track, his dad was arrested and was looking at 10 years in prison, basically for some quite serious crimes. And he came in on the last day that we were just going to listen back through the track, check he was happy with it, and that was it. And then he was like, came in with some stuff in his phone. He's like, I want to put this in. And I was like, okay. and it was all like, my dad's looking at 10-year, the whack, which is what they call a gun. Whack got caught. I don't even know he's went to be in court. Numbness is all unknown, because one day I'll have feds in my home, and then we just fine-tuned it. But that was like a moment of like, whoa, this kid is literally he's using it as a way of like navigating through this crap, and he wants to put it down. And I think that's really powerful. So that's one of the ones that jumped out to me. But I have it all the time. It's a slow burner, but I do have it all the time, because I think I'm someone that will be quite blunt, and I'll say to him, look, man, like, you don't have to talk like this. I understand you're growing up in those communities. You might have family involved and you've seen stuff, and I'm sure some of you are involved. But right now, just for this little 40 minutes of me, you don't have to be that person. When you go to the studio, fine, you're not in my class, do what you want. But when you're here, like, I just say to him, I can't have you saying things that's going to get you arrested. It's that simple. Like, it all put you in danger. So we need to think differently.
I'm interested in that bit where you're kind of sensing the profundity of what's happening, because then that means, because that also has an impact.
That's a good word, isn't it? Profundity.
Profundity. I was thinking that. Should we log that down for later?
Yeah, I've been a bit somewhere.
Yeah.
Profundity of
The
this
profundity of this activity was clear.
Sorry, go.
So that has an impact on you.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So that means that you also have to look after yourself.
Yeah, and I was fortunate enough to be in a position where I was working for City of Culture as a resident artist, and it was all about music against violence, against youth violence. How can we use music as a tool to combat youth violence? And also just talking about young people using the art in ways. And I was fortunate enough, I already knew the kids before we started the project. So a lot of it was asking these questions. And basically the commission had like a list of questions like, what is it like to be a young person in the city? How does youth violence affect you and all that? And I said, I'm going to treat you like an artist. And I just read out the commission. I was like, this is what I've got to make. But look, what would you say about that? Because they knew me, they were just pouring stuff out, like telling me about like self-harm and crimes they've been involved with, or things that they've seen in their area, or friends that have been killed. And it was just like, whoa, like, and I felt really like privileged that they're telling me and they're feeling comfortable that they can. But like you said, you go home and it's just there. And I've got like ADD, so my brain always has like 20 tabs open anyway. And it does just like rattle around. And I said, the nut and bolt of it is sometimes you're like, man, I just wish I could like adopt this kid and take him home with me. Like, because it's just like, if you were not born into that situation, your story would be completely different. Like, it's like not your fault. So I don't know. I think my way of dealing with it is talking to people. Talk to my girlfriend, talk to my dad, my mum. I talk to my line manager. But then also it's a bit like, I don't know, it's a bit ironic, but then doing exactly what they're doing myself. So writing something about it, trying to consume everything I'm feeling and just vomiting it onto a page, like, because that's always helped me since I've started writing. But it is tough. But I think if you, it might sound controversial, but because everyone says you have to switch up. And I know people that do really tough work. They work with like unaccompanied refugee, like children, or people that work in prisons and stuff like that. And people say you have to be able to switch up. But I think if you're not switching up, I don't know if your heart's really in it. And I'll be honest. And that might sound really, I know if people do switch up, I'm sure your heart is in it. But for me, I don't get how. I don't know how you could not.
I'm not sure that you can actually switch off.
I
think maybe that's really not the right terminology. Distance yourself from it temporarily.
Like,
but
everyone needs a distraction and stuff.
Yeah,
like,
but it's not because once you've seen and heard and felt and sensed, the cat's out of the bag. Yeah, you can't switch off, can you?
No, and to go back to your boxing thing about boxing, it's like that. I'm not a spiritual person. I don't meditate. I don't sit in the lotus position or whatever and burn incense. I box or I do martial art. That's my, when I'm knackered, all I'm thinking about is how knackered I am and hitting the bag. And I'm trying not to get my head punched in the ring. Like, that's all I'm thinking about. So for me, that is my like hour to 2 hours of my zen, if you want to call it that. Yeah. So that's important to me. If I don't get to the gym or I don't go out to run or I don't go kung fu, then I do. But my thing is I feel cranked. I don't feel like emotional. I feel like wound up. like kind of thing.
Yeah.
So that's something that's really important for me, like physical exercise. Like, I don't know if you've got anything to.
Yeah, you're talking about with your physical
Yeah.
process, working things through the body. And I think people forget about the body's role in all of this, in the psychological processes, because we are all connected. But one of the things that I learned to do was create boundaries for myself. And that's a word that I didn't really know before I started on the therapeutic journey with the writing and the masters. But I started to understand how little things like arriving on time or not saying personal stuff about you can create a boundary gap, a passageway where you don't enter the other side for the other person to feel like they're invaded in some way, or they're compromised, or privacy's been obliterated. But think for me, with the safety element, I think about now how much I've got in my cup, and when I've been with somebody, I might be affected by what they've said, but I do extra things to balance out. So it's all about balance. And in a previous podcast, we were talking about light and dark and duality, and having the capacity to feel pain can also bring capacity for greater love, and how trauma will bring people to a spiritual growth that they might not have come through had they not gone through the painful experiences. So I think because of those things, seeing the weighing scales, the cup, whether it's full or empty, makes me consciously reflect what I've done, what I've heard, and then make a decision when I'm out of that process with an individual or a group that I've been serving as a facilitator, and then going, right, do I want to have a takeaway tonight because I can't be bothered to cook because that was quite draining, or do I need to go and have a long hot bath and read with a book, or do I need to spend a week not talking to anybody about any psychological stuff, because that one conversation with an individual created so much for me to think about that I don't have any more space for anybody else now. So I can create a different set of pathways for myself afterwards, depending on what I've experienced in the week.
Someone that's just going to bed now, which probably makes sense for me, that I'm in 4x4 is, I think with me, the nature of what I do in the Prues, I'm only really working with the kids for like 2 years at the most, because it's year 10 and 11. So if I get them in year 10, got them for year 10, then I've got them for year 11, then they're gone. And for example, the lad I mentioned who lost his sister and stuff, worked with him when he arrived in year 10, but then his attendance got really bad. He was in and out. And sometimes it would just be a thing of he'd just come into my room and we just sit and talk, because they noticed he spoke to me a lot more than he did for anyone else. And I don't know if it's like a male thing, because there's a lot of female like staff there. I got him to do a bit of drumming though, and he was good. But then we used to just chat. We used to chat about boxing and just life and whatever. But then in year 11, he was like, I want to make this track. I was like, mate, why? I was like, I've been with you for a year. And then like, as you're on the way out, you say to me like, oh, I've got this track I want to write. I was like, we could have been churning it out or whatever. But so he's left the Pru now, because he's finished year 11. And it's like, you don't want to let him go kind of thing. But then what happens with me is the next lot come through. And then there's always a couple that I call my proteges, who are the ones that are particularly talented and on it. And it's like, right, they're the ones that I'm really going to like try and like go to town on kind of thing. And it just happens again. And then you take everything that I learned with that lad and I apply it again. So it hopefully gets stronger each year. So I think that's a good thing for me, that it's that whole like time's a healer cliche that like I'll be like, oh man, I miss working with that kid. But then you don't think about it for a couple of days, that turns into a week. And then you've got these other, for me, I've got these other young men, predominantly young men, that I'm now got to work with and get to that same. So it's just like a conveyor belt. And that actually helps me, that it's not like, that there will be a cut-off point. Like where like.
So we live, I mean, you can say these things about these situations and circumstances, because we live in a society where actually we live in a city and there's like, hundreds of thousands of people. I mean, when you're talking, what you were saying, it made me think about what if it was a small community and that kid would be someone that you see all the time.
I get what you mean.
And, what in a way, it's almost like the society that we're in. It's like, I know if I see someone on the street and then I bump into them again and again, it's kind of chance in a way. Those lessons, I know they're set up, but doesn't it speak about something maybe that we've lost? There would have been that continuous. So in a way, it's like now we have to have a practitioner, someone who does something, who makes something happen. Whereas it would have been like a collective thing within the family, the next door.
I get what you're saying. I think for me, again, going back to the very start of this conversation, talk about artistic ego, it's also knowing it, like, kids might disagree because she's like my biggest cheerleader, but there's other people like me and there's people that do what I do better as well. So it's like when your time's up working with me and the crew, I can signpost you to some studios or some activities or some youth clubs where there's similar things going on. So it's like, just because you're not doing this with me doesn't mean that you have to stop. And I think that's where the ego comes in, of being like, I'm just one guy. Like there's definitely other people out there that can help you. Maybe they can help you more than I can in this realm of music.
So there is going on. There is a connection out there.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Like
you've also got to remember that you're just a human.
That's
and
what I mean.
People piss you off. Some people you're going to vibe with, some people are just going to get on your bloody wick. And so if you work with some people and there's one person in your group that just pisses you off, then it's all right to just be like civil and polite and professional, but you don't have to like everybody.
And not everyone's the right person for right
exactly.
people. Like there's a whole, I'm seeing it a lot in education, definitely more with race recently, where, and I get it, that, people run projects engaging young black boys and they want a black facilitator, like, I fully get that. But I think there's that thing of like, not everyone is right for anyone. I like to think I've got a head where I'll just be honest about my privilege and whatever is going on, and I'll ask them questions rather than coming in, in white Maltese, Irish, whatever you have, Maltese or geezer, coming wearing like a bloody string vest and like trying to be all like something like
come straight out the trap house.
That's what I mean.
I'm a rapper from
bollocks, but and I think people do that. So going back to your question, it is difficult. I don't think I've got the answer either. And I've had it where I've followed kids back into mainstream and I've done like a few sessions with them in mainstream to help them get settled, and the teachers want them to be engaged. So it's like I've done some like lunchtime music making stuff. And then, but that has to stop at some point because there's only one of me, and I'm going to be in the crew 2 days a week, and I can't So there's also that, and I'm slowly dealing with that myself, handing it over and going, like, this is the lad I worked with for 2 years. I feel like I've made a real good stuff, but now I've got to hand it on to this facilitator, and it's up to you now, and that's difficult. But that's again going back to the ego. Like, it's not about me. It is sometimes when you have people saying, "Oh, can you send me all the tunes you made?" And no. So I made that. You do your
yeah.
but it's like giving credit where credit's due at the same time. I don't know. I don't have the answer. People always ask me about stuff like that. I've just got very lucky that I've naturally been able to like talk to people and engage people.
And do you think that actually, obviously, you're doing what you're doing and you recognise the value it has. Is there enough being done? Does more need to be done? Are we missing some tricks?
Hang on, this is going to be a 2-part podcast, bruv.
No, I'll keep
6-part
going.
series, mate.
Well, I think everyone can obviously do more, but I strongly believe it's having the right people. It's that thing of like, we were talking about music technology earlier, like now anyone can download an app on their phone and make a beat, and that's wicked. Like, I think everyone can do it, not everyone can do it well. And I strongly believe in some level of like quality control over what we do. I understand everyone's got to start somewhere. Like, I think back to like when I started doing youth work, volunteering in the local youth centre. I did some stuff that I wouldn't even dream of doing now. What was going through my mind then? Like, what I mean? Like,
it's a journey, isn't it? You're different every day.
I get that not everyone's going to be like fresh out of university being like, I know exactly what I'm dealing with and stuff. But the question was, sorry, what was your question? It was
is enough being done?
Enough.
Yeah.
Yeah. think you can always do more. I think you can always do
Yeah.
more, but yeah, I understand economics come into it as well.
It's not what you do, it's the way that you do
Exactly
it.
that.
It ain't what you do,
Like,
it's the way that you do it.
But I think that's the thing, isn't it? It's like they keep saying to me in the crew, I hope they're listening. I hope you listen to this.
Yeah, right. I want to pay
they
rise.
keep
I
saying,
want
like-
better pension, bro.
They said to me before, like, if the funds would allow it, we'd have you in every day. Like they get it and they've seen the impact and then
Yeah.
whatever. So I think the crew is hopefully touchable, head into a direction where whether it's not myself, we build a team where there's music every day, rather than just a Tuesday and Friday that I'm in.
Yeah.
And I think that's a little bit linked into can we do more, but then I understand that when you go on Magical Trees, as much as the Tory party like to talk about it and stuff like that, but there are economics and there's limitations, and that's what I mean about the quality control. I think it's better to have people that are really good at what they're doing
I get
than
it.
having
I
like
get it. But the
50
argument,
next people that don't know what they're doing and just make it messy.
Yeah.
but the argument is like, for example, I mean, I can give you a direct like argument in the sector, in the homelessness sector. It's like there's developed a way of dealing with it, which they call housing first. And the whole point is this: if you've got, for instance, in a city and you've got 200 homeless people, right? Rather than paying for the service year on year on year for 20 years, if you invested in each individual more, I mean, it would be more than it would cost you over 20 years, but then that investment would bring that person back on the track, which means that 25 years from now, there'd be no. So I think that there's an argument in terms of if you invest in people now, down the road, it's cheaper in the long run.
I get what you're saying.
It's
Yeah,
economic economies. And that, I don't think anybody's looking at that in terms of well-being and mental health, but I think it's something that needs to be considered because, you know.
Well, you can't blame people for being wrong or broken then, because it's not your fault that you've got somebody who's died and you've gone into some kind of shock or whatever. But you're treated like you're broken and you're not right, and you need to be a functioning, economically active citizen that can contribute to the state. Now, why is that? It's because whatever the state's doing, it's doing it under the pretense that we're all autonomous beings and that we're respected where we're at. And so we get the chance to determine ourself, our history, our future. So if you take that away from somebody and say, oh, you've been homeless, that means you're broken, you're a criminal, it's your fault, you're wrong. Oh, you've grown up in poverty, well, you should have got a job, you should have listened at school, shouldn't you? It's the sort of denial of responsibility of the sort of conditions that we're brought around in, isn't it?
Yeah, no, completely. I had loads of comments. When I used to work, when I first started this job, I used to do 2 crews on the same day. So I used to have to finish at one and get a taxi over to like another area of Coventry. And so I'd have all that booked, and the cabbies would usually always say to me like, "Oh, so what's this place kind of thing? Is this like a school?" And then I'd have to like just go, "As a school, but it's just a school of like kids that have been removed from education, so it's like more of a centre." And then every now and then you get some like numpty that would like, you know, be like, "Oh, so they're all like little
kids,
shits
yeah,
or whatever."
yeah.
And I was like, well, not really. I was like, some of them have made, don't get me wrong, some of them like just make bad decisions. Some of them like I can't get my head around like how like stupid they act sometimes. And whatever. But I remember one guy, he was like going off to me about it, and it was getting to the point where it was like starting to like piss me off a bit. And he was like, yeah, it's just stick them all in the army, national service, you know, because like, you know, that sorted everyone out, didn't it? You know, like get in the army, that or whatever. And I was like, did you serve in the army? And he was like, no. And I was like, well, shut up then. I was like, well, both my grandparents served in the army, and my granddad was a prisoner of war, and he was pretty messed up because of it. Like, so I don't think sending young men to go fight in like whatever is going to solve your situation, you mug. And it's also that it's like, well, if you've got such a like deep thing about it, like, yeah, why don't you volunteer like down there, if you know what I mean? And it is that thing of like the people that say we need to look after our own and do absolutely nothing to like, you know, like it's like the All Lives Matter crew, and it's like it's that kind of like neoliberalistic idea of the I And then, I can't explain it. Yeah, it's just,
yeah.
there's a lot, and I'm not expecting, but that's going back to my other point is then I wouldn't want that dude going into the centre and saying to them, your problem is you weren't in it, you haven't been in it. I feel like, you know what I mean? Like, so I don't think everyone is right for the job either.
So going back to what we started with in this podcast episode, what you've just done is take us on a journey of how your day-to-day practice shapes the relationship and how your attitude in the relationship shapes how somebody feels through being with you to create stuff. And that's something that cannot be measured. It cannot be put down in a funding application. It cannot be put into an evaluation through an outcome, because you're always going to be given a subjective observation on what the person that you're working with is feeling, and the person that you're working with is always going to have a subjective view of what's gone on between you. And the fact that you're saying that, some of the kids in year 10 gone through, get to year 11, they start to maybe open up and change. They wouldn't have got there unless you put that time in to talk to them about boxing, to listen when they're talking, to let them mold and shape everything. So it could take, now listen to this, commissioners, it's pissing me off, so you better listen to this properly. It could take 2 years of sitting with somebody like Joe, where your dad's on smack, he's got a shotgun in the house, your sister's been hit by a car, your dad's committed suicide, whatever it is, right? It could take you 2 years to open up about that experience. And would you want to open that experience up to somebody that you'd just met? I'm pretty sure the answer is no. And secondly, would you want to talk to a random stranger counsellor that the doctor sent you to 6 months after the last incident happened? No, it's not. So whatever happens in the, stop laughing at me, Ben.
There's a way you're looking down the camera as well. If people can't see this, you're looking directly to the camera.
I was looking down. So I'm actually looking at the table. Ben and Joe are just screwing with you here to try and make me sound like Incredible Hulk. There's a Freudian slip. Incredible hook, like an incredible left hook, right hook, both hooks. But you might not feel like it's safe for you to go there, because pushing that stuff down so deep might be easier, and talking about being in a trap house when you've never been in one, or talking about smoking somebody's ash in your spliff, or talking about a crime you never committed might be more easy than opening up the door to your heart and the traumatic experiences that you've been through. But then just having a random come in, make some tunes and then go, you cannot buy what Joe's giving, and that's care and attention. So it's people like Joe who should be commissioning and controlling the funding, because he can see what's happening on the ground and what is needed. So just because you can push paper around on a desk or talk about outcomes, none of that shit is real. Get this, it is not real. And whatever it is that you're thinking about as being a worthwhile value indicator or measurement or some kind of theory of change bullshit, sorry, in the experiences that Joe just described, where children are being brought up in this country and left to rot, I'm sorry, but those things don't matter. So just get real. The end.
And in the park, we're done.
Jesus Christ, sorry about that.
Yeah, brilliant. No, I was just, an example just came to my head of like, we so I'm going to be running a project in 4 schools in Coventry after school, and it's about engaging at-risk young people, and that could be at risk of gang violence, child exploitation, or like at-risk exclusion, stuff like that. And we went into one school, and we got introduced to the idea is we go into school, we meet the young people they've identified, we find out what music they're into, and then I've got to try and put a team together that will best tailor that. So if like a load of them want to learn acoustic guitars, I might need someone who can play guitar, like blah blah blah. But we went in this one school, and they didn't have any kids to speak to. So it was like, okay, it's a wasted trip. But they were like, but you can speak to our safeguarding like officers, and I was like, okay, cool. And their thing was just like, they were just trying to scare us, if you know what I mean. They were showing us all these drill videos and like, this is our kid, this is our kid, this is our kid going up. And I kind of had to say to them, like, you're aware that, like, I don't know if you're aware, I was like, I work with the ones that you kick out. Like, I work with the ones that you can't deal with
shut
like
your
so
bitch
like
ass
so
up.
all this
Sorry,
is like
sorry.
yeah, this is like
Sorry.
you showing me these videos is like normal to me because I get shown them like all the time. But the point is, and I obviously won't name drop anything, it's all in the press anyway. A lad I work with went down to the school because he had beef with someone and he scaled the fence and the school had to go into lockdown because of it, and the police were called and he got arrested and stuff like that. Now, and they were talking to me about this young man, and I was like, "Oh, X," and they were like, "Yeah," and I was like, "He's been like a diamond with me. Like, he's like, we've just been sitting around listening to music. We've started making a beat, and he showed me some lyrics in the phone, and they were really like, oh, good luck with him, good luck with him." And I was like, "Nah, man, it's like it's all gravy right now." And then this is a bit of a tangent, but then she said something to me like, she goes, "The fact he's talking to a white man, that's real good progress." And I was just a bit like, what the fuck does that mean? Like kind of it, like, and like, but it's like sometimes like, yeah, I don't know where I'm going with that. I just like, because I'm sure they do great work, but it was just like the attitude of it. It was just a bit weird, and it was just like, yeah, I don't know. I'm sorry, I don't know. What you said then reminded me of that a bit, because it was like, oh, well, we put him here and we put him here and he tried this and he'd been excluded X amount of times and whatever. Like, and I was like, well, maybe you never just put him in a writing workshop where he wanted to share his lyrics. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, it's that thing of, I'm not saying everyone can do that, but it was just that thing of like, going back to what other point, that not everyone is built for every person. Like with me, his sound, he obviously wasn't getting on with school. Like, you know what I mean? Like, well, he obviously, your safeguarding methods didn't work for him. But in the Peru, he's like a really nice kid, and like he's obviously, I don't know what gets up to outside of school, but with me, it's like there's no disrespect, there's no anything.
Sometimes that's about that initial first contact, isn't it? Because we've seen situations all the time where two people and it gets off on the wrong foot and it escalates to something ridiculous really fast. And I think that's emotional, isn't it? So that kid might simply just, whoever was supposed to be taking care of them, they didn't get it right, or they had a bad attitude about them, and then from that moment onwards, you've kind of made it difficult for that person. So it could be a teacher, it could be, you know, someone who hasn't handled the situation. Not the
you've
kid's
got
fault.
protocol that you've got to follow that is basically to suit an organization, not to suit a person.
And I think in all three of our work as well, like, there's not a root cause. There's so many different variables and factors. Like I can work with kids where they'll tell me about their family life, or I'll meet their parents, and I'm like, okay, that's why you're the way you are. But then I've got a lad that's been kicked out of private school, you know, and all the privilege in the world, like so his home life isn't the same as some of the other, like, you know, like, so it's like, yeah, like it's something like I wanted to say, which is like, because I talk about this a lot with my work and stuff, and I'm trying to write an essay, who knows, but I've just got all this crap in my head and I'm trying to put it on the paper. And like, one thing I've noticed, and one thing I've heard people talk about who work in youth engagement and stuff, is this thing of like, people go, well, they go like, well, I grew up on that block and I never like got involved in gangs, or well, I'm from that city and I never did, so well, I'm of this ethnicity and I don't feel the need to whatever. And like, people get too hung up on like the why, and think about like, what was it I had that they did, you know? Okay, I grew up on that block, my dad was about and theirs weren't. So like, maybe
people
like
talk to you and encourage you, their presence, their level of stability. You can't judge one person living in the same block to the next one, because you make a lasagna one day, it tastes different the next day, or you make the same pie 3 times and it's got different tinges, isn't it?
But people have this attitude of like, well, I didn't feel like that when I was young, so why are they? And it's like, well, nah, man, like, what? There's going to be a reason. You can probably work it out, but I think people get a bit hung up on
the way around that is the fact that I think they've done these studies on like biological twins and how they just turn up completely differently when they're from exactly the same environment. And
I can imagine with like people that deal with like drug abuse, you know, like, is that what I was just smoking weed and I never went and got into more serious, like, you know, like it's like, well, what was going on at that
Yeah.
moment in your life and what's going on. At that
We're not
moment.
all identical and
Exactly.
respond to the same stimuli the same way. We just don't.
But I think it just shuts down the conversation. Like, oh no, I'm bringing that private school kid into it. Like that also doesn't mean that he hasn't got crap going on. Like, you know, I mean, that's not what I'm insinuating at all. But yeah, it's like, well, we don't. Well, who's got? Like, I've just done it then. I've kind of been a hypocrite. Like, no, but it is that thing of like, yeah, it's not a one size fits all in any shape of the word. And I think too much of our systems are set up that way, whether it's education, whether it's mental health, whether it's So I don't know.
So we're going to finish off with just a little reference to a movie that I watched called The Wisdom of Trauma by Gabor Mate, who's a psychiatrist and physician who works in Vancouver downtown with people from the First Nations, Indigenous people of Canada, and people who are experiencing homelessness, prostitution, and so on. And he's developed a mode of working with them called compassionate inquiry. And in the film, there was a young man who described having privilege, cars, private school education, wealthy parents, and he was an addict living on the streets. So he had a wife, he'd had children, he had like a good job. And he was saying that when he was a kid, people in his family just bought him with affection. Sorry, people bought affection through money. So they didn't give him time, they didn't nurture him and love him. And provide the stable base that parents really should be providing for young people to grow from. And that meant that to satisfy the lack of love, he turned to drugs and ultimately led the life that he led. So I just want to leave you to think about that, listeners, and we will finish off with a track from Joe to play you out with. And Joe's going to choose the song.
Yeah. Not off his head right now. I remember when I send you. Yeah. So the track I'm going to send you is a dub poetry chat by my band Lobster with a dub poet called More Culture. So that fusion of poetry and music, and it's called The First Bird.
Thank you so much. So The First Bird coming up for you now. Thanks, Joe. Thanks, Ben.
Thank you. Thanks for coming, Joe.